elections and paper ballots.
Committee, any discussion or objections to introduction of this bill? Seeing none, that's introduced.
Second is 23 RS 0019. Again, a bill regarding elections and prohibiting the use of ballot images in recounts.
Any discussion or objections to introduction of this as a committee bill? Seeing none, those are introduced. Thank you, Senator Stephan. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Senator Pittman. Jeff Pittman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The RS number is RS 0589, and this is regard to recognizing the connection that Susan B. Anthony had to Kansas back in the day in terms of the right to vote for women and her deep connections inside the Leavenworth community. This was requested by the Historic Society in my county, so I want to make sure we got this in.
Very good. Committee, any discussion? Yeah, go ahead. No questions. Any objections to introduction of this bill? Seeing none, so introduced. Thank you, sir. Any other bill introductions? Phil Cosby, step on up. Thanks, sir.
Oh, do you have a bill?
Okay. Committee, any discussion or objections to introduction of this bill? Seeing none, that is so introduced. And I overlooked Senator Holzer. I thought you had a discussion question, not a bill introduction. Senator Holzer has a bill introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Pittman probably got a little worried there, thinking I was going to question.
I thought he was.
I do have a bill introduction, RS 0657, in regard to local control for firearms.
Committee, any discussion or objections to introduction of this bill as committee bill? Seeing none, that is so introduced. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our agenda today, which is hearing on Senate Bill 50. For those of you who are online, you can go to the Kansas Legislature website, kansaslegislature.org, go to the committees tab, select standing committee, look for the Senate committees, federal and state affairs, click on that, and then you'll find a little committee testimony. You click on that link, and it'll take you to a date box, select today's date, and the testimony is uploaded there, so you can follow along if you're watching online. Just one caveat is that the testimony is not necessarily listed alphabetically or in order of how they appear. That's just how the website works, unfortunately. So to get started, I think we're going to ask our reviser, Jason Long, to give us an overview of the bill. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 50 is a bill adding a section to the Kansas Consumer Protection Act. This bill primarily deals with the terms of service agreements between a user and an interactive computer service. This is talking about the bill defines those types of services as the service that provides you with the system or software to access the internet. And as you probably are aware of, as you've clicked through the I agree buttons on your laptop or your PC, where you have to agree to the terms of service in order to access that software and then access the internet in this case. These are the terms of service agreements that we are talking about. What the bill does is prohibit those terms of service agreements with users in Kansas from restricting, censoring, or suppressing information that is published to a social media website. And so that terms of service can't give the provider, the service provider, the ability to edit, censor the content that you choose as a user to publish to a social media website. As I said, this bill would place these prohibitions under the Kansas Consumer Protection Act, and so there are provisions to submit complaints for violations of those agreements to the Attorney General. The Attorney General is then required to investigate, and if the AG finds that there is a violation of the censorship restriction, can impose a civil penalty of $500 to $10,000 for each violation, which would be each instance of a service agreement that's entered into by a user. In addition to that, Senate Bill 50 also provides the individual user with a private cause of action against the interactive computer service and could seek statutory damages of $75,000 or more for each instance in which their content was censored by the interactive computer service. There are a couple of exceptions. The interactive computer service, if it's merely a publisher, would not be considered subject to the act. Also, if the service specifically describes content that it will not allow through its services to be published in the service agreement, it can do so, but it has to be very specific in terms of what it will limit or restrict in terms of content, and can only limit or restrict that content as specified. And finally, there is an exception to allow the computer service to restrict or limit content that is obscene or lewd, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. And there are provisions under the bill on page 2 of the bill to clarify what is meant by those terms, so the computer service has an understanding of what is permissible in terms of its censorship and content restrictions. The bill would go into effect on publication in the Kansas Register, so earlier than July 1st if it is enacted. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Questions? First from Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for update. And as I look through the proponents or opponents, I don't see the Attorney General weighing in. Have they talked or said anything? Do you know of their position on this?
I have had no communications with the AG's office on this bill.
Okay, thank you.
And I suspect maybe one of our proponents can speak to that, perhaps even Senator Stephan. We'll see. One question from me, it just mentioned in the fiscal note that the constitutionality may be challenged. Is that just anticipating some court challenges to any bill, or are there other states where this has happened? I'm just
I'm not familiar with particular actions that have been filed in other states. There is some question as to perhaps the constitutionality of a provision like this when you're restricting the ability of a private company to regulate its own business in this sense with these. But this has been couched in terms of a contract issue under the Consumer Protection Act to try and avoid that type of challenge and litigation. Obviously, it's pure speculation at this point because it's not been enacted yet. So I can't really speak to what the Division of Budget's concerns may be with their fiscal note.
so it could or could not. I mean, just like any legislation that we have, pretty much.
Yeah, I guess I would refer to the Attorney General's office as to what he thinks might be the potential for litigation on a statute like this.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it very much. Going to start off with our in-person oral proponents, and we will try to limit it to about 5 minutes so we can get done on time. We want to give us latitude, however, for the conversation. This is an important bill, and we want to hear from everyone. So first up is Senator Mark Stephan. Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Chairman. Esteemed senators, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I will try to be efficient with the time. This is a very, very interesting story, and I will try to tell it in story form. And first off, I would like to thank Jason Long. He's been working on this for over 2 years, and this is fraught with hazards. It is a very delicate walk through a minefield, and we have done it, and I think you'll see that shortly. Also, kudos to my son, Colin Stephan, an attorney in Kansas City who participated in this, and Brian Anderson from Reno County who played a big role in bringing this to fruition. This is a bipartisan issue, and this is a bipartisan bill. You may hear me use the words conservative and such, but do keep in mind that this is a bipartisan issue. to. The story starts back in the early 1990s. We had a few nerds and bookworms walking around with this good idea to create these platforms, so to speak, to where people could come on and interact with each other. And apparently they got our U.S. Congress to think it was a good idea. But their problem was that people were getting on and putting horrific information on there, just horrific stuff. And these fledgling companies were being held liable for what other people were putting on. So our U.S. Congress passed Section 230 of the Federal Code. It basically does three things of importance. And number one, it says no provider of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider, saying they couldn't be held liable for what somebody else put on there. The government also gave them a good Samaritan protection from civil liability in the good faith removal or moderation of third-party material they deem obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. And I wanted you to hear that because you will see those terms throughout this relatively short bill, because what we had to do was walk around the landmines of Section 230 to make sure we didn't violate it. Lastly, Section 230 does say in it that the states can't undo it, and we don't. We absolutely do not undo it. What we do is help further define the vague terms of lewd, lascivious, et cetera. We help flesh those out. And one way we do that is we say that does not include political speech or political expression. So it very, very carefully walks through this. These fledgling companies I mentioned, they became Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The problem began when they started moderating content whimsically. That's when the problem began. That really kind of came to a head in 2016 and all. We've all heard this, from Trump to small-scale political campaigns where campaign ads were being hid in junk mail, to medical information being censored on Facebook, Twitter and their interactions with the White House that we've seen to control the narrative on the COVID response, and even most recently with Newsmax being shut off by DirecTV. The cancel culture continues to this day, continues to be a problem. The spirit of fairness and truth has been violated. On an interesting side of this has been, I've devoted a bunch of time to this. I've got to sit down with the heads of these companies, the head representatives, their attorneys, and discuss this situation on 2 occasions. I got to do it at the ALEC conference in Salt Lake City, and I got to go with Senator Masterson to Silicon Valley to specifically meet with these representatives from these big entities. They come at you like you've never seen. They're like a tsunami. They're incredibly aggressive. They're laden with half-truths and even blatant lies in regards to this. They try to bully you into submission. And when you don't submit, when the meeting's over, they come over to you both times and say, yeah, using that Consumer Protection Act, that'll work. That'll work. Both times they said that to me. We may hear more of that today. SB 50 artfully navigates Section 230. SB 50 protects the social media entity's First Amendment rights, and it protects the Kansas citizens' right to be heard regardless of political affiliation via our Consumer Protection Act. The bottom line is, while the social media cancel culture, they've had their gun pointed at conservatives like myself, who knows when that gun will turn and be pointed at the other side of this continuum. And you know who you can ask about that? Just check with Elon Musk on how quick that gun can turn and be pointed at you instead of me. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a clarification in layman's terms. So, so you're saying that we can put anything on social media to and not be censored to particular issues?
Well, not at all. If it falls in the category of lewd, lascivious, overly violent, et cetera, that still is censorable, yes. The social media entities still retain the opportunity to moderate.
So more so freedom of speech,
For,
whatever we want to post.
well, it just further defines those terms and says it does not include political speech or political expression. And it really wouldn't include religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs, it wouldn't include medical thought, new treatments, new options along those lines. It would sure cut down the extraneous censoring.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, so can you give us a real example, just in layman's terms of, you said kind of coming after you or just a real situation to warrant the legislation? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, you bet. Obviously through the whole COVID response, I was the voice for ivermectin and the pursuit of early treatment for COVID. And at every turn, my Facebook pages were being throttled and warnings put up on them, and all sorts of interference was going on in regards to my narrative on early treatment for COVID.
Thank you.
Could I speak real quick in regards to constitutionality?
Yes, absolutely. That was one question Senator Reichman had. He wondered if you'd talked to the AG about this and with regard to the Constitution.
They have rendered an opinion on it, and basically, yeah, it could be challenged. There's no question about that. This is cutting edge. This is new statutory attempt. It's been done in Florida. Florida just came out and said you can't do it. And that was found to violate the social media entity's First Amendment rights, and so that was thrown out. Texas did it a little bit different, and it's going through the court system. They did not do it like ours. Again, ours very carefully walks around the landmines associated with Section 230 and with their First Amendment rights, and does not violate any aspect of either of those issues. So again, to some degree, this is about being bold and standing for fairness and a level playing field in the social media world, and that always comes with the possibility that they might try to come at us. I do not believe they will do so successfully, and they've told me that.
And one other question, and I am giving Senator Stephan a little more latitude because he's the initial carrier of this bill, with regard to publisher status for social media. They don't want to accept that. They want it both ways. They want to be able to censor somebody, but not accept or adopt the publisher status, which would hold them accountable for that, correct?
That's right. As long as they say they're not a publisher, and that's part of Section 230, and that's held up in our bill. If they're not the publisher, they're not liable. But in Silicon Valley and Salt Lake City, they were walking around saying they were publishers, and which throws all of Section 230 out. I don't know what their game was with that. I think it was more of a bullying tactic than reality. And I don't know what they're going to say today, if anything at all, in regards to that. But if you're a publisher, you're liable for what's on your platform. End of story.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark, for your testimony. Where can we, do you have available the Section 230 where we can get this, or is that a reviser's, or? Yeah, I need to get a copy of that, get a lot more understanding. This is new to me, so appreciate that.
And I think we can have Sheila send copies to the entire committee so they can review that. Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to follow up with a question I had right at the beginning. I think I have the same concerns as you do, where the having a lot of censorship with the media, or different aspects of it. I just wanted to make sure that what we're doing would be legal, or what the challenges would be, and I'd just be interested in what the Attorney General, the legal scholars would say in that. So that's where my concern is. Thank you.
Sure, I understand completely. I don't think there's any way anybody, any attorney could ever tell you there's no risk to it, nor should there be. A lot of this is going to be just the willingness to go forward with what the people want, number one. This polls at 85, 90% accepted by the public wanting this to stop. So it's important that we have the courage for the people to achieve what they want.
Any other questions? Thank you, Senator. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
We'll try to attempt to stay on time. Our next proponent is Lauren Schiffman. Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and committee members. I appreciate everything that Senator Stephan had shared. I'm here essentially to give you examples. So Senator Fascicuto, one specific example actually happened to me. I'm from Lenexa, Kansas. And the only reason why actually I'm even on social media, because I actually left it a couple of years ago because I was really concerned about digital footprint. I try and teach my kids that whatever you put online can end up anywhere, so you have to be very, very careful. So if you look at my Facebook page, first off, you'll actually see me under Lauren Wimmer. That's my maiden name, and the reason why I did that is because of all the scrutiny that people are getting, and I was looking for a job about a year ago, and I was afraid that maybe my post might be offensive, even though the only post that I ever post 95% of the time is, come to the Capitol. Here's a bill that's being introduced. Let your voice be heard. Come to the Johnson County Board of Commissioner meeting. Let your voice be heard. I really don't post anything else. So I want to give you an example of what just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. And I'll read it. It's in my testimony, but I want to make sure that everybody can hear it. It says, call to action this Thursday, January 12th, 9:30 a.m. It gives the address, 111 Cherry Street, downtown Olathe. Stop Chair Kelly from ending our freedom of speech. Bring a sign, or better yet, speak. Sign up to speak until January 11th at noon. I leave the address there. Kelly, that's Chairman Kelly in the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners, is stopping all video calls and removing the comment portion from the recorded video part of the meeting. So essentially anybody that wants to hear public comment in Johnson County now has to be physically present, and they no longer broadcast it on the internet like they used to. They actually pause the meeting, let that happen, and then bring the meeting back. Kelly is, he said his victory in November showed that Johnson County was ready to rebuke extremism and conspiracy theories and misinformation. That's a direct quote from this gentleman. If you cannot make it, please email him and all of Johnson County commissioners. Let's stop him. Now, I ask everybody in this committee, is that violent, lewd, crazy, inappropriate? I personally don't see it. So after I posted that, a gentleman said, his name is Jeremy, and you can see in the bottom of the post, it says, what's the post about? It says the content's not available. So, and I just sent this over to Sheila last night. I actually went through my Facebook page. I have 9 pages here. Content isn't available right now. Content is not available right now. One of them just says, join us. So it's just pages and pages. I went through probably maybe 60% of my content is unavailable, but this is my content. It's not anything else. So if that's not proof that censorship is going on and it's inappropriate censorship, then I don't know what is. So just to close, I recall years ago contemplating what it must feel like to be in China, what it feels like to have your voice censored. All you have is propaganda from the government. I never thought that it would happen here in Kansas. or here in America for that matter. And I'm proof that it actually is happening. So I really urge you to move forward with this bill, help protect the good-willed nature and fundamental rights of our citizens just to even gather at the Capitol. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren from the committee? Senator Faust-Cadeau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lauren, so when you say they and when you say the content was removed, what's your theory of who is removing it and how are they doing that?
It's Facebook, and they do it in a matter, they either would shadow ban me, so they would make it so my post wouldn't get to other people, it would be downgraded in importance, or shockingly just not available. So I never removed any of these posts. And they just show as a blank, and you can see on the copies, content is not available.
So,
Yeah,
Mr.
Facebook.
Chairman, Lauren or staff, then how would we actually make this happen if we don't control Facebook? How would the law, the passage of this bill help prevent that from occurring?
Jason, if you want to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the bill prohibits any agreements that would allow a social media content service like Facebook from conducting censorship in that manner. And if they were to do so, there are provisions under the Consumer Protection Act, both for the Attorney General to prosecute those violations or for the user to bring a private cause of action in a court of law against the company.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may.
Yes, Lauren.
Yeah, so this is just 9 pages over the last year and there's 4 on each page. So if the provision did take place, I could potentially make a claim with the Attorney General and they would be liable maybe up to $36,000 for just removing these posts. And that would be at least something instead of just saying, sorry, you can't encourage people to join you at the Capitol. Thank you.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. How is this reported? Do you know? I mean, is there some kind of a list that maybe you've been put on, or any thoughts on that?
You know, thank you very much, Vice Chair. I understand there are maybe people that follow you, so you can kind of get tagged based on content. I would assume some of the groups that I'm in, they probably follow those groups. I'm not 100% sure, but no, I'm never notified. I yet to have been banned from Facebook. I haven't. It's just my posts just get removed.
Follow up, yes.
So they've never reached out to your contact. You just takes it off and that's it.
Like it didn't exist.
Thank you.
That gentleman said, I can't see your post. What are you posting?
Senator Blasey.
I apologize. This might actually be a question for Senator Stephan. Kind of piggybacking off what Senator Oletha Faust-Cadeau asked was, did the courts rule that Facebook has a First Amendment right, or is it ruled that it's not a public square? I guess that's where I'm confused on the legality of the constitutionality.
Senator Stephan. Yeah.
Well, and that's a great point. And I don't completely have my head around it. Jason may be able to clarify it more. I'm not exactly sure where they find Facebook's First Amendment right when they're just a platform and not a publisher. I don't understand that, but in some respect they have. That's what they've done. Do you have any clarification of that?
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, I have not read that case from the other state. I'd have to review it before I could comment on that question. I can do that and provide the committee with some information at a later date.
I think that would be good. Thank you. Any other questions? And just a reminder, as Senator Stephan pointed out, this is a bipartisan bill. This is speech going either way. It's not necessarily right or left, Democrat or Republican. This is trying to allow everyone a free voice as long as they follow the guidelines, and that's what this is about. Debbie Detmer is our next oral proponent. Debbie?
Hello, I'm Debbie Detmer of Shawnee, Kansas. Good morning, Chairman Thompson and the members of the committee, and thank you for listening to this bill. This bill is important. We must prohibit the internet, social, and media terms of service and permit censorship of speech, including fines for violation. I am a proponent of this bill. Censorship is universal, but particularly marked in political dictatorships and totalitarian regimes. Restriction of freedom of expression and restriction of freedom of information is controlling us right now with the cancellations on Facebook and YouTube, to name a few. I have been kicked off Facebook several times for mentioning masks or the vaccine or scientific information, and they call it misinformation. They have one message, and if you deviate, you are canceled, or they will put you to where nobody sees your post. You know, I might get one person that sees the post. I had a rally in Shawnee Mission School District against the masking of our children in school on May 17th and 21. Many showed up and spoke at this meeting. The district used YouTube as their platform for the distribution of the meeting. On May 17th meeting was removed by YouTube due to misinformation. The Shawnee Mission School District immediately stopped all comment portions of the meeting from being shared on YouTube. Their reasoning was the threat of losing YouTube as a platform, and they wanted to stop the misinformation. So no transparency at Shawnee Mission School District since. Unless you are at the meeting, you have no idea what the problems with their policies are being addressed. Even after August 21st, when YouTube did repost May 17th meeting, stating they will not suppress schools or government meetings. But right now, our Johnson County Board of Commissioners, Mike Kelly, the chair, unilaterally decided to use these facts of misinformation and the threat of losing YouTube platform. He then, finally took a vote, and it went 4-3, where they're still dictating the censorship of free speech, controlling and restricting the people's voice and information. The dictatorship and totalitarianism actions must be stopped. The snowball effect, where it's going down to our schools, where it's going down to our chair, I mean, it just never ends. They started and they just keep using the ball. It is cognitive slavery. So please pass out this out of committee. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Debbie. We appreciate that. Our next oral proponent is Carol Donis. Carol, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Hi there. I'm Carol Donis. Thank you so much for having me here. I live in Olathe, Kansas, and I will tell you this is the very first time I have ever been in the Capitol. It's a beautiful place. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to speak, and I wanted to be able to explain why it's so important that you pass this bill, the SB 50. Social media, when it was first introduced, was so appealing. It allowed us to connect with friends, family, people from all over the world. I have a friend that lives in Germany, so it was awesome. Allowed us to be able to reach a vast audience in a very quick amount of time, right? But after these past couple of years, I believe you, just as I, have discovered that the intent was deceptive. Very deceptive, because it sounded so great, but then who are they? For the very first time in history, our country was founded on the principles of freedom of speech. We all know that, protected by the US Constitution. These companies deliberately will stop at nothing to censor anyone whose opinion is different than theirs. I believe this is outrageous. Do you not agree? And this has gone on long enough. I mean, they call it misinformation or disinformation. Don't you see the game here? That's their playbook. I think we're pretty sharp and we understand what their tactics are to control the narrative, and they refuse anyone to exercise freedom of speech when it's different from theirs? That's pretty clear. Many people no longer want to watch the news every day. I'm a precinct committee woman, and I go and I talk to my neighbors, I talk to my people in my precinct, and no one wants to watch the news anymore. And why? Because it's all doom and gloom. Not only that, they don't know who to trust. Who is going to report accurate facts rather than just giving their opinion to promote their narrative? And that's what you get. Because of this, social media has taken advantage of this as well. I'm astounded, okay? I'll just tell you, I'm 65 years old. I did not grow up with social media. Before we had social media, I mean, I never would have imagined this kind of stuff going on in our country today. I am very upset about this. We have to be, because, you know, this is just outrageous. You actually get your news from social media? That's what a lot of younger people do. My daughters do. So how do you reach people if you cannot even have freedom of speech? So some examples that I'd like to personally, the things that I've witnessed include the following. You know, as Debbie Detmer had mentioned, you know, I retired about 1.5 years ago, and I decided to get involved in the community. Lived here for 27 years. Everything's wonderful. Started going to the Johnson County Board of Commissioners meetings, and I found out, you know about the announcement that the chairman basically made a decision, even before he began his first meeting, to institute a new policy about the rules to YouTube that said that they violated the YouTube rules, and because of some of the things, some of the speeches that some of the residents had given. And then there's been a number of articles that I can provide to you as well that the press was there in the meetings, and they've come out with articles that explain exactly what it was, because they differed from the opinion. Because someone questioned the the election fraud, and they were saying that. And then they questioned also during 2020, during COVID. We all went through COVID. They're questioning about mask mandates. All I did was ask about mask mandates or vaccine mandates or lockdowns. I mean, why is that a problem to question that? I don't understand it. So they will no longer allow the Zoom to be available. What about the people that are working full time? How is that not a violation against them? Those that are disabled or the elderly that cannot get there in person. That's just a little bit too much, that they aren't even going to allow people to even understand what they're saying. They are the ones that are passing. They are passing all these, making all these decisions about our community. They have the ability to increase our taxes, but yet we don't even have a voice. I don't understand that. Okay. So another example that occurred in COVID-19, I attended a number of health symposiums that started in the fall of 2021. I have a health insurance background, by the way, where renowned physicians and scientists that were associated with the International Alliance of Physicians and Scientists came together to provide substantial evidence of how to successfully treat safely the COVID-19 virus. Why is it that the mainstream media and the social media companies that refuse them to speak to the citizens of this country in order to save lives and quickly treat those in need? Individual rights and health freedoms were censored, and the government's response to treating patients was ineffective. I will tell you, so, the thing is, I will give you an example of something.
For the sake of time, we need to tighten it up just a little bit, Carol, if we can, because I do have some opponents I need to hear, unfortunately, but we need to give everybody good time. So.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to mention that there's a lot of things that are going on all over the world right now that I've seen videos. I have a video I was going to show you in Turin. All these people that are dying because they've gotten the vaccine, and that's real. It's real. But they're not showing that. And I'm concerned about my grandson. My grandson just turned 2 years old, and I will hand this out to you. Because if we cannot get this information out to save lives.
You'll have to give it to our committee assistant to hand out, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carol. We'll tighten it up here a little bit so we can get done in time. I do see Vicki Klein as our next conferee. She was listed as WebEx, but is in person. Vicki. And again, for sake of time.
Showing up and seeing you guys.
Yes,
I like
it's
to
a good
support you very much. Vicki Klein, Overland Park. I know we're quick, and I have a debate background, so therefore I'm going to try to make this really quick for you guys. My question to this bill for SB 50 is basically, does the government, are they also liable for anything? Specifically, we have the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency. We have CISA, and on their websites, they print things, and they have partnerships. They have partnerships which they tell you flat out, our elections are under Department of Homeland Security. So sometimes I had a hard time understanding why when Dominion, ES&S, all software companies that have websites that we go to, we try to get information, we pass it off, and it gets shut down that from their own websites, okay? So I couldn't understand why sometimes the government was stopping it, was saying it's you know, they didn't want you to explain that they are in contracts with them. So when when our government has a contract, I'm really curious about this bill. If our government has a contract, and we now know on their website, they tell us who they have contracts with. They have Dominion, Crosscheck, which we know is just now been going to China through Johnson County to give our personal information out. Democracy Live, Democracy Works, ES&S, electric registration information, smart. Most of these are software products. We have no problem saying, and we also say that we know that there's problems with a conflict of interest, but us having contracts with them and taking their advice and letting them do stuff with our elections is okay. It's okay if we have a conflict of interest. I'm trying to figure out if SB 50 in any way, shape, or form will help us, because in the state of Kansas, when you're trying to tell them that we're having problems when we go into vote with software, we go to publish what is going on, and people want to shut us down because our government is we're already fighting with ourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? We are already fighting against our own government. Also, what do you do with data collection? You know, our Secretary of State wants all of our data from all of our sources to come in so we have it all in one. What do you do with contracts when our Secretary of State is saying, no, give us all data from your schools, from your hospitals, from everything into one source because it's easier. And then it starts going out on websites. And you're starting to, your personal information that could affect your job and everything else. Some of this I don't understand. And I want to know where, when it comes to contracts, I want to know if my government can be held accountable. And I want to know if it's affected them shutting me down to talk about elections, to tell them my government is in a contract with companies that we are finding are in conversation and sharing information with other nations. Is there any, that's kind of my thing.
Okay.
Okay?
Committee, any questions? And I failed to ask for any questions of Carol either. Great. Seeing none, thank you, Vicki. We've got Adam Peters next up, and what we're probably going to end up doing for the sake of time is holding the oral opponents over to tomorrow so that we can give them proper time to testify. So we'll finish up with the proponents today. And next up is Adam Peters. Is
yes,
Adam
sir.
in the audience? Adam is WebEx. There we go.
That's right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for your time. As you said, my name is Adam Peters. I currently serve as the Ellis County GOP chairman. 2019, my wife and I created a conservative website called Right Edge Magazine. And we saw some initial success. We managed to build a Facebook page with over 14,000 followers. However, despite publishing several viral articles, we quickly found ourselves being stymied by social media censorship. We were banned on Twitter, MailChimp, immediately canceled our account, and Google barred us from running ads. I've included screenshots in my testimony, which is documenting this. Facebook throttled our page, and it caused us to go from millions of views at the end of 2019 to almost none. Again, we have an image which attests to that. Now, the platform, they were happy to take our advertising dollars when we would advertise posts, but it ensured that very few people saw stuff we were putting up. Interestingly, we noticed that the posts that contained links were particularly susceptible to being suppressed. And so we kind of resorted to making our page just like a glorified meme gallery. But we still don't see very much engagement. And as of right now, I'm not adding new content to our website because there's just no opportunity to realize any return on the investment. Um, but big tech has not only impacted our personal lives. I was elected chairman here in Ellis County last August, and my wife was elected vice chair. So we started building up an online presence. There had not been much online activity for the county GOP over the preceding couple of years. And to do that, we created a Gmail account for the local party. Now, we only use this account to set up social media accounts and to communicate with Big First Chairwoman Laura Francis. Despite this, Google suspended our account after less than a week, allegedly for violating the terms of service. Again, there's an attached image showing our cancellation. To sum it up, these sorts of discriminatory practices have sabotaged what we believe would have been a viable business for my wife and I, and the roadblock engaged organizing.
Committee, and there's our need for high-speed broadband right there. A little hang up in the Adam. Did we lose Adam?
No, I'm still here. Was that chopped up?
Still there. Okay. Just at the very end, we didn't miss much. Committee, do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. We appreciate that. Our final in-person, thank you. Our final WebEx proponent oral is Peggy Springer. Peggy, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good.
Yes. So I want to talk about, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you.
So my name is Peggy Springer, and I thank you for allowing me to come and speak on behalf of my husband and to hopefully help this bill get passed. My husband's name is John Springer. In November of 2021, excuse me if I have some emotion, he got sick with COVID. He had very, very, very mild symptoms. My husband died December 2nd of 2021. The censorship of doctors trying to share important life-saving medications and early treatment information, along with the censorship of the FLCCC protocol and censorship of the deadly effects of remdesivir, along with other black box deadly medications, my husband lost his life to the deadly hospital protocol. My husband was healthy and strong and was not that sick. But because information was kept from us, his life was taken. Sadly, because of the censorship, many have lost loved ones. Censorship has damaged trust in our healthcare system. Had we known what we know now, my husband would still be here. Because doctors and information that would have helped him were silenced, my world and our children's world suffered a tremendous loss. It empowered the hospital, and because of that, his life was taken. So thank you for your time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Peggy. Any questions from the committee for Peggy? Seeing none, we still have a little bit of time. Committee, we have 22 written proponents of the bill, and I want you to have time to look their testimony. There's some very good stuff in there. We have no in-person oral proponents, no neutral. So I think we will have time to hear our WebEx opponents after all. First up is Corey Marshall, Director of State and Local Government Relations, Central U.S. Chamber of Progress. Corey, welcome to committee. He's on WebEx. And where are you from, Corey?
I'm in Illinois, Chairman.
Illinois?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, Corey, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Olson and members of the committee. My name is Corey Marshall, and I serve as the Director of State and Local Government Relations in the Central U.S. for Chamber of Progress, a tech industry coalition committed to ensuring all Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our corporate partners include companies like Google, but our partners do not have a vote or a veto over our position. We urge your committee to oppose SB 50. This bill would allow offensive and harmful content to flourish in online communities. While this bill's authors attempted to limit its protections to political speech, the bill will force platforms to carry and publish all forms of dangerous and harmful speech. That's because while the bill claims to allow removal of obscene, lewd, and harassing speech, any user who has their content removed will be able to assert their speech was in fact political expression and should be allowed under this bill. By prohibiting platforms from implementing terms of service that allow them to restrict, censor, or suppress information, including political information and political expression, SB 50 effectively blocks services from taking action to remove unverified claims about elections, democracy, and public health. The bill would impose a false impartiality standard that would hobble platforms' constitutional freedom to remove or downrate QAnon conspiracies or self-harm instructions. For example, under this bill, doxing state and local elected officials, leaders, harassing users with opposing views, organizing political insurrection, and spreading health misinformation would all be protected as political expression, and online platforms would be forbidden from removing that content from their services. Furthermore, the bill's definitions under Section 1H of what constitutes obscene, lewd, or harassing content are vague and overbroad, serving as a weak assurance for online
Oops,
users.
we lost you, Corey.
Can you hear me?
Corey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
WebEx is being a problem. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Hopefully we can get him back for some questions. I have several. Let's move on to Jordan Rodell, who's a state policy manager, Computer and Communications Industry Association. Jordan, are you on WebEx?
Hello, yes, I am.
Okay, Jordan, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chair Mike Thompson and members of the Senate Committee on Federal and State Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Jordan Rodell, State Policy Manager at the Computer and Communications Industry Association. CCIA is an international not-for-profit trade association representing a broad cross-section of communications and technology firms. While recognizing that policymakers are appropriately interested in the digital services that make a growing contribution to the U.S. economy, we caution against several provisions included in SB 50. First, Kansas cannot and should not attempt to force private online businesses to publish dangerous and otherwise objectionable content. In addition to prohibiting illegal content as required by relevant state and federal laws, many digital services remove content that is dangerous, though not inherently illegal. This includes, for example, content that encourages users to self-harm or encourages young people to engage in dangerous or destructive behavior. Thus, while it is not explicitly illegal to engage in cyberbullying, or even to evangelize the American Nazi Party, many digital services nevertheless act on such content to uphold commitments to their user communities to combat dangerous or abhorrent categories of content or behavior. Thus, if digital services are compelled to treat all user-generated material with indifference, their websites could become saturated with inappropriate and potentially dangerous content and behavior. Second, businesses operating online depend on clear regulatory certainty across jurisdictions nationwide. Existing U.S. federal law provides legal and regulatory certainty for websites and online businesses that they will not be held liable for the conduct of third parties. By limiting the liability of digital services for misconduct of third parties, U.S. law has created a robust internet ecosystem where commerce, innovation, and free expression thrive, while enabling providers to take creative and aggressive steps to fight online abuse. Creating a patchwork of state laws would undermine this legal certainty and harm competition. Lastly, the private right of action would result in the proliferation of frivolous lawsuits. SB 50 permits consumers to bring legal action against companies that have been accused of violating new regulations. By creating a new private right of action, the measure would open the doors of Kansas's courthouses to plaintiffs advancing frivolous claims with little evidence of actual injury. As lawsuits prove extremely costly and time-intensive, it is foreseeable that these costs would be passed on to individual consumers and advertisers in Kansas, disproportionately impacting smaller businesses and startups across the state. We appreciate your consideration of these comments and stand ready to provide additional information. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jordan. I see Corey. It looks like Corey is back online. Corey, if you could finish up, and then we can open up to questions for our oral opponents.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Yes, we've got you now.
Chair Olson, I really appreciate the opportunity to finish my testimony, and I'll start off where I stopped, and I was here. Under Section 1H, the bill states, SB 50, states that offended content that taken as a whole lacks serious literary, educational, artistic, political, or scientific value could be taken down by platforms. However, the term value in that definition lacks a clear standard and is entirely subjective. While this bill seeks to limit platforms' ability to engage in online content moderation, voters have clearly expressed a preference for safer, healthier online communities. In a national poll commissioned by Chamber Progress, 67% of voters said social media companies and online platforms should be able to block violent and offensive content. In fact, a majority of voters want social media companies to do more to remove harmful content, not less. Consumers have consistently shown that they are concerned with the amount of offensive content on social media and that they want platforms to be able to remove it. Unfortunately, this bill would make the problem worse by tying platforms' hands in the fight against toxic incendiary content. If Kansas passes this bill, it would turn social media into a wasteland of hate, hoaxes, and conspiracy theories. No one wants the internet to become a cesspool of lies and hate. We urge you to listen to the concerns raised by voters and fellow lawmakers and reject SB 50. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Jordan. Committee, any questions for either of our oral opponents? Senator Holscher?
Yes, thank you. I don't care who wants to address it, but I was just thinking about, what would prevent a person then under this bill from posting something that's just totally inaccurate, but then saying, well, it can't be taken off because it was political? I mean, does it allow a certain amount of cover is what I'm wondering.
Jordan or Corey, either one who'd like to speak to that? Could you hear the question?
Do you mind repeating that? Sorry about that.
Sure. No, sorry, and I'll make sure I'm closer to the microphone too. Under this bill, could a person post something that is just very blatantly false, but then say, well, it's political in nature? I'm trying to determine like how much cover does this bill allow a person?
Yes, that was part of what I was testifying in support of, is exactly the point that you're raising now, Senator.
Myself as well. There's no real mechanism that would stop that information from being online.
I have a question, if no other committee member does. Who determines what is toxic? Who determines the community standards? I've had newsletters to my constituents, which I posted a link to on Facebook, taken down, and the only response I got from Meta was that I'd violated community standards. And this was all purely informational. So who are the fact checkers? Who are the people who make these determinations?
Senator, what we're saying is that social media companies have a right to create a safe online community for their users through their agreements. For example, they have a right to take down self-harm posts. Suicidal posts might be constitutionally protected speech, but social media platforms don't have to host that speech if they don't choose to. And they are just lacking, they're justified in taking it down when it promotes harm to other users. Users and voters consistently say that they want these platforms to be able to take down or hide content that they don't want to see.
But who determines what harms other users? And who determines toxic speech? Is there a committee? Are these individual? Because I asked for a response. I said, how did I violate community standards with a post that was purely informational? And I had no response. Who determines that? Who are these people? How do we push back? I've had this happen to me numerous times.
I would just say, I can't speak to any, specific instance or, a specific, company and what they, how they regulate content on their platforms. But I will say, my only kind of something that I would explain is that, there are many of these mechanisms that these companies have in place do have repeal processes. So, theoretically, what should be happening is that you should be able to apply to be, have certain instances of your content being taken down. You should be able to appeal to that.
But after the fact and after it's been throttled and the reach of your post has been limited, there's no recourse, correct? In other words, a lot of people are using this because it's so ubiquitous as a public utility. This is their way of expressing their free speech and their First Amendment rights. How, once you've already throttled, or once a Google or Facebook or whoever has throttled that speech, what kind of recourse do they have other than passing a bill like this?
Senator, I'd like to echo again that we aren't opposed to transparency for users. Most platforms have published their terms of service that outline what types of content are and are not acceptable, and they regularly publish reports detailing their content moderation decisions. They make the decisions to answer your question. However, this bill would force platforms to provide so much information about every decision that they would end up giving bad actors the roadmap to keeping disinformation or violent material published.
And apparently I'm a bad actor. Senator Holscher.
I was just going to interject something that might kind of answer that question. It might also answer something that was brought forward by one of the supporters of the bill. My understanding is on some of these social media platforms that once you have a post or something that is deemed inaccurate, there is a time period. So that could be why some posts then aren't showing up, because there has been an initial post that had issues. So it goes from that time period, is my understanding. But there's probably some other people out there that are more familiar with those rules.
Okay. Committee, Senator Blasey.
I apologize. Sorry, last minute question. You know, when you say the words offensive, that the platform has a right to remove the things that are offensive, unfortunately, we live in a society that's so deeply divided now. I think where you have Democrats say one thing, it offends the other side. Republicans say one thing, it offends the other side. But it seems that policing happens on one side, towards one side instead of both sides. And I think all you have to do is look at KS or hashtag KSLedge on Twitter to realize there's a lot of hateful words on there that don't get censored. And it's created a toxic environment. Unfortunately, a lot of just, you know, I agree that violent things should be taken off of social media, but I think it's just a slippery slope to say that these platforms, which is what I would argue as policymakers we are hoping to establish, are public squares. There should not be censorship of speech, particularly in a society where it seems like the other side's always offended by what they say, but it seems like it's always just going one way. It seems like, especially in the last few years, conservatives have been censored more than anybody else.
That we are, committee, we are out of time. Thank you, everyone, for your testimony. We will close the hearing on Senate Bill 50. And we appreciate everyone. The testimony is very important. This is an important bill, and we will consider it very soon. Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned.